Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this live webinar. I'm Alex Kurm. Thank you for joining me. For those of you that are coming from whatever time zone you're in, but thank you for joining me. So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about a process mapping solution, a free process mapping solution that I really think is hugely valuable. And yes, it does it all from my perspective. Just before we get started, a couple of housekeeping rules as well for those folks that come on. If you're live streaming anything at the same time, Netflix or Hulu or anything like that, you might want to pause or hold off on that for now. For the next, I'd say the webinar will be an hour long. The first 15-20 minutes will be some slides about the background of the tool. The tool is called Elements.cloud. So a little bit of background on the tool, why I think it's so valuable. And then we're going to get right into looking at the tool live. And then if you stick around towards the end of the webinar, I'll give you instructions on how you can access your own version of it to start playing around with it right away, show you how to kind of get it all set up. And then also, if you want to, it's yours after that. So you can invite others to use it and try it out, whatever you want to do. So if you stick around towards the end, I will give you those instructions. And yeah, and so hopefully that'll be valuable to you. So it is being recorded. There are a lot of people that unfortunately couldn't join at this time, but that's good to know for future. So it is recorded and it will be made available to you. Whoever registered and signed up, it'll be made available to you after we're done. And then it's available to you with the link to the video whenever you need it to refer to it down the road if you forget some of the stuff that we talked about today. Okay. On the right side of your screen is a chat window that you can chat with me, ask questions, Q&A, that sort of thing. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat window. And then also, I'll leave some time for Q&A towards the end of this session. Yeah, so feel free to just pop it in the right side of the window. Okay, couple things that I wanted to talk about just before we get right into the slides and the demo. First off, the most common question, I wanted to answer this right away because I get it all the time. So the most common question I get around this when I demo this tool is, well, if it's free, so what's in it for you? Why are you even showing us this if it's free? What's the value to you? And here's how I'm answering that. So at the end of the day, I'm doing this because I've had about 16 years of my career and experience has been in process improvement, Lean, Six Sigma, BPM, process management, that sort of thing. And throughout my career, when I've been helping companies roll out Lean and Six Sigma and help them execute, I wish I had come across a tool like Elements.cloud way back when. It would have made my life so much easier. So for those reasons, when I became aware of this tool, now I dedicate a lot of my time to help educate, show people what this tool is all about, because I think it is hugely valuable for what you want to do from a process perspective, from a risk management perspective, from a BPM, Lean, Six Sigma perspective. It's hugely valuable. So for those reasons, I don't want other people to struggle like I did. And in fact, I didn't even know I was struggling. But when this tool came, I'm like, wow, this would have made my life so much easier. So for those reasons, that's why I do these webinars. I can reach hopefully a lot of people all at once with these webinars to kind of educate them on this tool is out there. It's free to use. There is a paid version, which I'll talk about, but it's free to use, and why not use it? And the more people that use it, my business does a lot of things, but one of the things it focuses on is if people need help deploying the tool, if they need help with training and that sort of thing, that's where I can help them. I don't sell the software or anything like that. I'm not basically the software manufacturer, but so the more people that are aware of this tool, great. It might help me down the road. It may not help me down the road, but regardless, I don't want other people to struggle. So that is why I show this tool to people. That's why I do these webinars. So reach as many people as I can to show them how valuable this tool is. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, why not? Let's get right into it. So let me bring up a few slides that I'm going to go through around Elements. And let's see here. Okay. Okay, so like I said, I got about 15 minutes or 20 minutes of slides, and then we'll get into some live demos so you can see the tool live. So the tool is called Elements.cloud, and it is technically called a freemium agile business app. Okay, and so what that means is there is a very powerful free version that is available to everyone. I should say that it is free for as many users as you want in your company, in your organization, forever. And then, of course, how they make money. Elements.cloud, the software company, they basically have a paid version of the license as well for advanced features. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of highlight the free stuff and the paid stuff. You can kind of get a feel for what is what. And of course, even the paid version, when you compare it to other solutions out there, it is extremely affordable, depending on what you need for your organization. Okay. Okay, so let's get into it. So a little bit more about myself. So I mentioned that my background and experience has been in process improvement and process management, Lean Six Sigma. So I call it Master Black Belt, Lean Six Sigma coach, trained, certified individual. I've been certified as a black belt twice already, and obviously been a coach and a Master Black Belt in different organizations. So the bulk of what I do is now as an independent consultant. I've got a small business that focuses on helping companies become better from a process management perspective. I've chosen to work with Elements to say, you know what, this tool is fantastic. The more people I show this, the more they love it. If companies need help deploying it, well, I offer services around that. So I can help people get trained. It is a very intuitive tool. So I also have self-serve, on-demand tutorials that are available for people as well, just to get rolling with Elements. At the same time, I also help them, deploy it, execute against it. And sometimes I can provide a help desk type of support for back office administration around Elements if people need that. But the other thing that I do is for companies that are deploying Lean Six Sigma that may or may not choose Elements, regardless, I also offer what's called a virtual coaching portal. And in that portal, it's actually quite unique because it's not a situation where I have to come on site and you have to spend a tremendous amount of money. I actually bring a group of people through that might work for one given organization, coach them through their projects, coach them through that implementation around Lean Six Sigma and how they approach and use it for a given project. They participants and these practitioners get almost daily access to me, but it is in a virtual setting, so it's actually quite unique. So that's a bit more about myself. As I mentioned, I did not make the software Elements.cloud. I simply think it's fantastic, and I've been showing people as much as possible what this tool is all about and how they can get started with it. So let's get into it. What is Elements.cloud? So Elements is essentially it's more than just a mapping tool, okay? It's more than just a diagramming tool. At the heart of it, of course, is maps, process maps and diagrams, but it is a process documentation tool. It is a process management application. In some cases, it actually can replace your quality management system. So if you're an ISO certified company, if you're BRC in food or you're a HACCP regulated facility, people have used Elements to replace the quality management system that supports those initiatives. It's the foundation for your process management and governance for your whole company, if that's what you want. They market it as the visual operations manual for your business. And of course, as I mentioned, there is a free, very powerful free version, and then of course, paid licenses as well if need be. Okay, now, the map in the background is what I use to kind of describe the complexity that we often deal with process mapping. So process mapping doesn't have to be that complicated. Now, the map in the background, that's not what Elements looks like at all. I show this as a way to show traditionally what process maps look like, and what you think they look like is that. Now, the reality is there's nothing wrong with that map in the background. It's probably a map that's really, it's obviously very detailed, and it's very useful if you're an IT or process guru. But if you're a frontline employee, if you're the general employee that knows nothing about process or IT, you're not even going to look at that map to do your job. It's really confusing to understand what is going on in that process. Even if you're an IT or process guru, it's very complicated. So Elements actually takes a different approach. Elements was designed from the end user's perspective. And in their mind, the bulk of the end users in this world are people that don't know, they don't have a huge background in IT or process. They are people that need to use the maps to do their job. They're people that need to collaborate with IT and process gurus to, for a transformation or digitization type of effort. So because of those reasons, Elements has a very simple notation that you'll see in that white circle on the left, okay? The notation is called UPN, or Unified Process Notation. And basically, all that means is that Elements has a very specific and easy to understand notation compared to things like BPMN, right? So Elements doesn't really leverage BPMN notation. So what that means is it's boxes and arrows. A box depicts the activity, the verb and noun of what you're doing. In each activity box, you can identify who's the resource that's performing the activity, and are they using a specific application. All the inputs and outputs are, easily labeled as well, so you know what's coming in, what you're doing to it, and what you're delivering, what's coming out of it. Okay. Any symbols are pretty intuitive. So a paperclip means an attachment of some kind, and you can literally attach anything you want to a activity box. This is a huge value that Elements provides that other solutions don't really provide. I can attach really anything: a procedure, a policy, risk information, a detailed risk assessment, a control. I can attach a screenshot or a how-to video. Whatever you want can be attached directly to the activity step. People have even used it to attach and a link to an enterprise risk management software where they use that to manage the risk for and compliance for their business. So really, it's quite valuable what you can attach to Elements. On top of that, Elements deploys a slightly different type of mapping style that you may have been used to, or you might have seen with other solutions like Visio or iGraphics or even kind of Lucidchart. So Elements deploys something called hierarchical mapping. And why this is valuable is that it basically allows for lots of different things. First and foremost, it allows you to have various levels of abstraction that if you're a executive or a leader in an organization, you may not be too fussed with the really nitty-gritty details. So you come in at a higher level to consume process content. And if you want the details, you simply click and drill down hierarchically to get more detail as you need to. If you're a frontline employee or supervisor, you can come in right at a low level and consume that content, right? Because you're going to need much more level of detail to do your job. The other benefit of this hierarchical mapping is that everything's connected. So you don't need hundreds of maps all over the place that are disparate and just not, disconnected from everything. If it's a really low level of detail, it's connected to a higher parent level process map. And so everything can be easily found. It's in one place. They're not scattered all over the place in SharePoint or wherever. And then the final reason why it's really valuable is if you're familiar with process frameworks or classification frameworks, something like APQC, which is just a standards organization that creates this content, you can bring in and import, and Elements has already done this for you. You can import process frameworks right into Elements, and of course those frameworks are hierarchically driven, and they look, something like this. So this is just an example of a banking classification framework. So if you're a financial service or bank in the world, you're typically doing all of these, if not many, if not all of these things, these 13 different, process groups. You're going to develop a vision and strategy. You're going to develop and manage products and services, market and sell them, deliver the physical product, and deliver some sort of service. And then, of course, you've got a bunch of support functions and things that you do around HR, around IT, financial resources, that sort of thing. So this is the highest level of the APQC banking framework, and it's called the level 1 process category. And an example, if you dive into, let's say, deliver banking services, how it works hierarchically is level 2 will say, well, what are the 3 steps on how I deliver that service? Okay, so you establish some governance around strategy around your service, you manage your resources, and then you deliver that service to the customer. Well, if you want to say, well, how do I deliver it? Well, I do these things. I'm now at level 3. I open an account, I analyze creditworthiness, I maintain that account, and so on. And you can see that when you do this hierarchical, disaggregation, if you will, at some point you're going to get a really detailed process map that you can start to hang off of this framework, and it becomes really valuable. And so why I talk about this framework is that Elements has already done this for you. It's imported this APQC framework right into Elements. It's free to use from today. You can use it right away. And it's a really great way to get started with your process management and mapping and improvement needs, okay, by leveraging these types of frameworks, okay? Here's just an example of what it looks like in Elements, and I'll show you live in a moment. But if you're a supply chain or a consumer goods company, again, level 1, you deliver physical products. Well, how do you do that? You do these 4 steps, and one of them is managing logistics and warehousing. So how do you do that? Well, you click down further, and another drill down says, here's how you manage logistics and warehousing. And there's no limit to how deep you go. You can create as much content as you want, but that's really how Elements is structured, and it's done this way so that people consume the content in bite-sized chunks, as opposed to thousands of boxes on a page, like I showed you on a previous map example. Okay. Now, I mentioned you can attach things to Elements. So yes, here's an example of a process map in order to cache one. You can attach a dashboard for metrics, KPIs, process metrics. You can attach links to SOPs, like I mentioned. But more importantly, on the right side of this slide here, you'll notice that you can, for every single diagram, Elements captures the basic information around who is the process owner, who's the author, when was it created, when was it last modified. Very important for governance type of activities, okay, and needs. On the bottom left, another feature that Elements has is it has detailed version control. So if you want to change your order to cash process, modify it, tweak it, whatever, you can publish version 2 or version 3. And Elements automatically archives the older versions for you so that you can see them and revert to them whenever you want. So version control is critical in a lot of governance and compliance needs. That comes with a paid subscription in Elements, but nonetheless, it's a feature that's highly valuable. Okay, when you get into the world of compliance and regulatory and government kind of compliance, some of the features in Elements, this is where you get into a paid version. But you are able to, if you want to, with a paid version, which is again quite affordable, and I'll mention that in a moment. You can upload central lists of information. So in this case, I've uploaded a central list of banking controls. You could upload a central list of ISO controls or HACCP, food safety critical control points, or CCP controls. And the value there is that now you're not really managing those controls in Excel or whatever. You're managing it inside Elements if you want, but you can attach those controls right to a process step. You can put commentary around it so that way, whoever's performing that process that needs to implement that control and use the control to mitigate that risk, everything's in one place. Their controls are there. They know it's a critical control. They know what to do, and it's right on a certain process. Behind the scenes, when you're managing the control, you can run reports in Elements to say, show me everywhere that I've got a credit monitoring control. And you can run reports and say, a credit monitoring control is on these 10 processes. So hugely valuable, this type of feature in Elements. For companies that are worried about or need to manage GDPR, which is a fairly recent regulatory requirement that came out of the European Union, but it's not specific to them, it's actually applicable to the world. Elements has a way to easily manage and track your GDPR compliance and challenges with that. It also integrates really well with Salesforce. If you're a Salesforce customer, Elements has full integration with Salesforce, which if I get a chance, I'll show you what that looks like as well. For ISO folks, HACCP folks, even banking folks and financial services, Elements has the ability to build and manage corrective actions. So you can create a corrective action, you can status the corrective action, assign it to people, and kind of track its completion. And at the same time, if you're an IT, if you're a business analyst of some kind, a process analyst, or in IT, you can build and create and manage your requirements in Elements as well. And so why that's valuable is you can attach the requirement, or you can attach the corrective action right to the process step where that occurs, so that you're now integrating your detailed requirements, which used to be in Excel or Word. You're now integrating it with a process flow, so that it makes it so much easier to build and automate or improve a business process when you're integrating your maps and all of your requirements or your corrective actions. Okay, you can collaborate around the content, whether it's maps or attachments or corrective actions or risk info, whatever it is. All of that can be you can collaborate around it. You can have a dialogue, and that dialogue is like a thread that's attached to those artifacts, and you can always view it whenever you want to. Okay, for the companies that really are deploying an agile lifecycle development or software development cycle, here's how Elements fits into that world as well. So on the top left, capture requirements. So yes, you can use Elements to build, manage, and capture your requirements. That is free. Then you can map your processes. You can map as many as you want, as deep as you want, for as many users as you want. That is also free. And when you take maps and requirements, now you can also start building user stories to say, oh, okay, what is it that my customer service rep or my quality analyst needs? And you build detailed user stories. That is also free. Now that you've got requirements and maps and user stories, you can use that to upload directly into Jira. Jira, there's direct integration from Elements for the paid subscription, or you can upload it into Salesforce and automate, or any solution you want to automate. And then, of course, you can then have different releases, which is a paid model of Elements, but you can release the first iteration of that feature, and then the second or third or whatever. Okay, so you have detailed release, revision, and version control as well. So because of all of these things, I do like to say that Elements is essentially a one-stop shop for all your process content. It's basically the one place you go to consume, process maps. You can link process maps to each other. You can link to anything you want, procedures, KPIs, screenshots, videos. You can attach controls, upload ISO, SOX, HACCP controls. You can build and manage requirements and user stories. And of course, then you can track your corrective actions. So because of those things, it's an incredible tool for workforce training and to mitigate the risk of turnover for your organization. It's an incredible tool to manage your rollout of process improvement, BPM, Lean Six Sigma. So it is that one-stop shop that you need, and it is hugely valuable. Okay. So apart from maps, the other thing you can do with Elements is you can kind of create these custom landing pages. So here's just an example of a landing page, for a food company, or in this case, a beverage company, sorry. And, you can create this world where people come to a place to consume content. Maybe they want to see a process map, in which case they can click the button for processes. Maybe they need to get into HACCP and detailed quality procedures. Well, they can click on that button. Or maybe they want to link to process metrics and KPIs. You can create a button for that. So not everything needs to look like a process map in Elements. You can create these custom landing pages that make it a little bit slicker for people that come to consume content. Okay. So I do also so who else is using Elements? What other customers use Elements? So a couple things. Elements have actually, they work very closely with Salesforce. It's a standalone business. It's a standalone application from Salesforce, but because they work with Salesforce exclusively, or not exclusively, sorry, intimately, there is a direct integration with Salesforce and Elements, and I'll show you an example of that. So not surprisingly, there are lots of Salesforce customers that are using Elements. And outside of that, you get companies that typically are in some kind of a regulated environment, whether it is food industry, financial service industry, pharmaceutical industry, typically will use Elements. So Aegon Asset Management, Infusion 360, Mercer, these are all kind of in that compliance world of financial services. And then you've got Simply Protein and LT Foods and Scott Baird are all food companies. And of course, you've got Sony as well. So there's lots of companies using it. There's probably a couple thousand that are out there using Elements today. And it's been around for a little while already. Okay, so before I get into the licensing, I'm going to show you live the tool itself and what the tool is all about. And then I'm going to come back and talk a bit about the licensing, what's free versus what's paid, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So just give me a moment. Okay, so you should hopefully be able to see my screen. There we go. So when you access Elements for the first time, or when you're in there, it's going to look like this. It'll look slightly different because I do a lot of demos, but Elements organizes its content in something called a space. So I'm in a space called prototypes and demos, and in there I've got a lot of, sorry, these are my spaces, but in there I've got a lot of maps, okay? You might have just one space for your organization. You could have more, but typically speaking, if you're an organization that wants to deploy Elements, you'll have one space, and in that space will be the collection of process maps that make up your business. So I've got a bunch of dummy maps in here, but there are also a few other things that you can manage for within a space. So you can manage requirements. Okay, so remember I mentioned you can build, manage, create requirements. Those are in a space. So here's a list of kind of all the requirements I've built to kind of manage. You have something called reference models. Now this is only available with a paid subscription. So I've got a paid one and I've got some reference models. And again, this is the section where you would upload, if you wanted to, critical controls for banking, or for HACCP, or whatever your control, environment is, SOX controls for banking, that sort of thing. A URL library. Now this is also a paid subscription, but if you want a central place to manage your URLs, that comes with the paid model as well. And that's the URL library. And then of course you got releases, which is basically when you want to do a new release for a new process, a version 2, 3, 4, you want to publish it, you would create that version here and then publish it. So that's also here, and that's also a paid model. So what do you get for the free model? So back to the maps. If I wanted to show you, I'm just going to show you quickly what a map looks like. So if I bring up a map, and I preloaded it already, here's a basic, order to cash process. So again, like I mentioned, it's fairly high level because I started at a high level, but you can drill down to whatever detail you want with Elements because, again, as I mentioned, it's hierarchically driven. It doesn't have to be. It's a canvas, so I could put on hundreds of boxes if I wanted to, but that's really not the value of Elements. It's really, you want to build maps in bite-sized chunks and drill down when you need to. So, for an order to cash process that looks like this, let's say I want to quote the order. I know that the sales rep needs to perform that activity and they're going to use SAP. Okay. If I hover over the top left, I can see, well, what are the next few steps on how I quote that order? If I click it, which I can do, it'll bring me down one level in the map, and I can now, look at the next few steps on how to order, how to quote my order. Okay. I can simply jump back up if I want to, which I'll do. And same thing. If I want to process my order, again, I can hover, it'll show me the next few steps, and you can keep drilling down. There's no limit to how deep you go, but that's how Elements is structured, is hierarchically, and it's quite a nice feature. The other thing you can do, you can attach literally anything you want to the maps. And so for example, let's see, fulfill, let's do this, fulfill, let's see what we have here. So if I want to fulfill my order, I could, in this case, actually, sorry, let's do quote order, because I know I have a procedure there. So on the quote order, I have attached, if I click the paperclip for quote order, a procedure on how to do that. This could be a written procedure, Word document, whatever you want. As long as it's a URL, you can attach it. But you can see I've also attached a requirement, okay? And maybe there's a requirement that I want to build an e-signature capability on this step of quote order. So you can attach a requirement right to a step, quite valuable. I'll show you that in a moment. The other thing that you can do, so every single map I mentioned has certain information that is very valuable from a governance and a compliance perspective. So every map, in this case, this map or diagram, it says who's the owner. So I own it, I authored it. It was last modified on this date, and it was first created in January. Okay, so hugely valuable. For paid subscriptions, you have the ability for visual change logs. Okay, so I can go back and look at what this map looked like a few days ago, weeks ago, whatever, and see physically what the map looked like and what changes it's gone through. Okay. Then you have something called version control, which is detailed version control and archiving. So you can see that, this is kind of a timeline, right? And again, version control is paid subscription only. But with the version control, you get this. So here's this timeline. So I've got a draft, I've got version 2 and version 1 archive. So version 2 is what I'm on right now because it's highlighted. I can't, when I click here, I can't edit this map even if I try. There's nothing I can do to edit it. I can interact with it by bringing up, the attachments, but I can't edit it because it's a published version, right? End users can't change the map, it's published. But if I wanted to change it and I had ability to do that, the author rights, I just go to the draft. I click on the draft, and then Elements is going to revert me back to the draft. And here's the draft. If I want to edit the draft, you can see now I've got the ability to edit a draft, and I can do whatever I want. I can add more boxes and add more flow lines, whatever it is I would like to do, right? And that's interesting because if I now go back to my version timeline, you can see that when I go to version 2, those new boxes aren't on there because I haven't published this. It's only on the draft. Okay, so see, the draft has those 2 new boxes and version 2 does not. If I want to publish it and say, hey, this draft is now the new version, I simply make it ready. Another process map that might be valuable. So in banking, so here's a typical retail loan process for banking. Again, high level, if you wanted to see further details around how you originate a loan, I could simply hover or click and take me down further to say, oh, here's how you originate the loan, right? Maybe on the adjudication step of my loan, I've got a detailed control. So if I click on the attachment as an end user, it'll say, oh, yes, you know what? There's a financial attestation control right here. If I click it and open this, it's going to take me to my list of banking controls, and it's going to tell me some more info on what I need to do. So here you go, financial attestation, and over here, here's a description. Management must complete the quarterly SOX and financial attestation. You can put any language in there you want to describe what the user needs to do to perform the control. But here's where the controls, centralized controls, becomes really valuable. When you upload your centralized list and you get a control like this, a financial attestation, if I'm managing this control, I can click on this links button and see everywhere that I've attached this specific control. So you can see it's on underwrite loan, it's on, this process step here, it's on this one, it's all over the place. So I can see right away, oh, it's on this step, let's go jump to that process where that control is. Or I could run a report and say, show me everywhere that this financial attestation control is attached to. So really valuable stuff when you want to get into the world of controls. So let me just cancel out of there. The other thing you can do is actually use custom data tables to gather information around your process, around your control, or sorry, around your process, whatever that is. And so what I've done is I've built another sample to show you the value of these data tables. So let's say I've got a fresh vegetable process or produce process like this. Okay, and it's a bit of a, obviously it's a demonstration map. But let's say at the rinsing step, I've got a critical control from my HACCP plan that I need to manage. Okay, so if I click on the paperclip, I've got a detailed procedure that tells me what I need to do to perform this step properly. I've also got a risk assessment. So if I click on this, maybe I need to do a risk assessment for, excuse me, let me switch to edit. Maybe I need to do a risk assessment or a HACCP risk assessment on this step. And you can create these custom data tables. And I'm going to add a record. And I'll show you. I just created this custom data table to show you what's possible. So who's the QA tech that's performing this risk assessment? Let's say it's myself. What step am I performing it on? I don't know, let's say this is just a dummy example. What type of hazard am I dealing with? Let's say it's chemical, it's cleaning agent. Is it addressed in the plan? Yes. What's the severity? I can describe. How do I prevent it? I can describe. Is it a critical control point? No. And I'll say add record. And so what that does is it now adds a record to my risk assessment. So you can continue to do that and pull the data from here and run reports, whatever you want. And again, just a custom data table allowed me to do that. The other thing you can do is gather information. So around critical control points, like if you need to control temperature at this step, and I know I need to do it as a critical control point for quality or whatnot, I have created this water data temperature data table. So you can have an operator or a quality person go in and do their actual data gathering and say, okay, who performed it? Let's say it's Sally performed the actual water temperature inspection. She did it on this particular date at this time. What was the temperature? 31. Is it acceptable? Yes. Did you notify a supervisor? No. And some commentary and say add record. And so what this does is it's now keeping a record and record keeping around data that's valuable to your process to keep it in compliance, to keep it in control. For regulators, auditors, all those folks that might come on site, you can easily run run reports to gather information around that. So hugely valuable stuff. Okay. Okay, let me just go back and show you a couple other things. All right, so those are some maps I can get rid of. Now, I mentioned requirements. So you can build and manage requirements in Elements as well. So if I click on requirements, it's going to list all the requirements I have for this particular space. Let's say I wanted to create an e-signature requirement for, I don't know, banking, whatever. So let me just do that. Okay, so right away, let's pick up one of these examples. Maybe this one is probably better. Okay, so if I click on electronic signature capability and open it up, I've created a requirement that you can, if you want, build more information around as a bit from a business perspective. So what is the actual requirement? Let me just show you how this is done. What is the requirement? I need to replace all my wet signatures with a digital one, the priority, impact, risk level. When's it due by? Is there a specific release it's related to? How might you implement it? And then tag it with whatever information is important. And then you can raise the requirement. Now, what's valuable is for every single requirement, I could add an attachment. Maybe it's a note, maybe it's another link that says, here's more details around this requirement. Maybe it's a data table. In this case, I attach an image to say, you know what, here's what I want this electronic signature to kind of look like. Something like this, okay? You can attach that to make the requirement more valuable and useful. You can also see, you can also attach this requirement wherever, to different process maps and then see where is it attached. Oh, it's attached here. It's attached on this process. It's attached on this one. So right away, if I'm managing requirements, I could see every map that this requirement's attached to, so I know where I got to update it, where I need to implement it, okay? I can also assign and add comments around there and say, at whoever's, got access to the space, take a look at this requirement. Okay? And I post it, and I'm going to get a notification, or whoever I put on there will get a notification. I can come in and look at exactly what the question and comment was, and I can resolve that commentary as well here if I want to. And I can also change the status of each of the requirements. Okay, so quite useful in managing requirements. The other thing you can do is when you've got requirements is you can manage a user story. So for this one, let me see if I've got a user story here. If you click the top left here, it says stories. Right, I do. I've got a few stories here. So let's open one of these up. So I've got an e-signature user story. And all that means is, for as a particular resource, so you can pull out a specific person, a resource that you've identified, and I've just said as a customer service rep, right? What do I want to do? I want to define that experience, right? I want to enable clients to sign documents electronically using a mobile or a tablet, a desktop device, whatever, so that I can, get this authorized legal copy signature, put in some acceptance criteria, release level, all this stuff. And then submit that. So now you've got a user story, and you can attach all kinds of information to the user story, like screenshots, images. You can almost kind of create like this journey, if you will. Okay, so detailed user stories with Elements, and again, that's free. Requirements gathering is also free. So very, very powerful stuff. Let me just check on my time. The last thing I wanted to show, or a couple last things I wanted to show you, was around corrective actions. So again, if I go to my requirements section, and let's do let's see if I got a HACCP one. I think I do. Let's say you want to create corrective actions for your HACCP program, food safety program. You could create a corrective action using a requirement feature like this. And if I click on it, again, what's valuable here is you take this requirement, you can describe what's involved in the requirement. So what is required? Maybe I observed that the sanitation step has been unsatisfactory. You got to revisit a procedure or do some root cause analysis, whatever, and assign a priority, impact, risk level. All that stuff is the same, and give them some idea of how to fix it. Okay, so you can create this corrective action. Then you can say, well, you know what? I observed it and it wasn't ideal, but here's what the proper procedure should look like. I want you to sanitize the equipment like this, using this device. So you can attach images. You can attach any sort of attachment you want. I can see what step is this corrective action related to. Oh, it's right here on separating my meat step, okay? I can assign it to people and say, you know what? well, there you go. I assigned it to Alex to please look into this, and I can resolve it when it's done and say, yeah, all done, right? And I can see which ones have been resolved and which ones are open simply by toggling back and forth. You can also see the history of when it was submitted, raised, all that sort of thing. So really valuable and easy, quick, free way to manage corrective actions for your compliance needs and for your regulatory needs as well. Okay, jumping back, I mentioned I want to show you a little bit about things like Salesforce. So Elements integrates with Salesforce. If you're a Salesforce customer, it's actually delivered inside your Salesforce org. So I've actually opened up my dev environment for Salesforce, and you can see that I'm actually in Salesforce, right? Elements actually shows up as a managed package or as an app here. You can launch it from here once you upload it and connect to it. And then once I'm in here, you can see that I'm in Elements. I click on Spaces. It's actually interactive. I can actually work on my process maps inside of Elements. Here's my prototypes and demo space that I'm in, and all the maps that are in that space as well. So valuable stuff, because when I'm in my Salesforce environment and I'm creating new fields, I'm being asked to create fields, create new forms, that sort of thing. Doing that in the absence of your process maps and diagrams is problematic. And so this brings it together. I can physically look at a map here, my lead gen process inside of Elements to say, what does my lead gen process look like? And then when you look at your lead gen process, you can attach different things here. So let me see what I've attached here. Right, so I can attach, in this case, opportunity data field. This is a field directly from Salesforce, right? And it takes me right to my actual object field in Salesforce when I want to. And then now you're integrating your data fields with your process content so that I know that when I run this process, where we execute this lead gen process, here's the specific data that I'm gathering for Salesforce, so that if I ever change my Salesforce fields, I will know which processes are affected by those changes, and vice versa. If I ever modify my lead gen process and automate and do other stuff, I know how that's going to affect my Salesforce deployment. So hugely valuable stuff. How Elements is kind of integrated with Salesforce. Okay. Here's another quick little thing on how Elements manages Salesforce. So when you go to this reference model section, which is a paid subscription, okay, and I scroll, when I integrate the two, what it does is it brings my Salesforce config file, uploads it into Elements as a reference model, and here it is. Here is my, detailed Salesforce config file, and look at this. This is what's quite valuable, is when I click on, let's say, objects, standard objects, and let's say I go to opportunity, for example, and fields. So I click on fields, and you can see on the right side a few windows kind of get populated here. So all of my fields that are for my opportunity fields have been attached to this process step called qualify opportunity on this map. So I can go there right away. If I click here, it'll take me right there. But more valuable is if I drill down to now a field level, here's account ID. I could, if I wanted to, add a note to say, why am I gathering this data? What's important about it? Who asked for it? I can see what step is this specific data being gathered on. I can also look at where else is it used. And if you're concerned with things like GDPR, which again is a it's a new regulatory protocol that came out of the European Union around data privacy, you can actually assign this data field a particular status related to GDPR. So is it actually personal data I'm gathering here, or not applicable or unassessed? And why that's valuable is that Elements actually collects that information and shows you how susceptible you are to from a GDPR perspective. Okay, so very valuable stuff. You can integrate Elements with Salesforce, and then use that to manage your GDPR deployment as well. Okay, let me just link back and see if we've got any questions so far. Back to the chat window. Okay, all good. Now, so we've covered Salesforce. So what I wanted to do very quickly is show you folks how to access your free environment of Elements. Before I do that, I thought it's valuable to talk a bit about what is free versus what is paid. So let me go back, and I'm going to share my slide presentation with you again. I'll come up in a second. And okay, so here's where we left off. So I mentioned Elements is free. So yes, it is free. There's a very powerful version of Elements that is free forever for as many users as you like. So it's amazing. So I mentioned that what you get for the free license is unlimited process mapping. You can map as much as you want, as deep as you want. There's no limits. That comes free. You can attach any URL you want to your maps. That also comes free. That also means that you can attach a requirement and user story, and you can do corrective actions. All three of those things are free forever. So right off the bat, if you're a company that has any regulatory needs, any compliance needs, whether you're a food or banking company, whatever, hugely valuable that this stuff all comes to you for free. You can create custom data tables to gather risk information, to gather risk data or any process data. And again, you can do basic reporting, sorry, not basic, you can do lots of reporting, extensive reporting around your process content and all that information. And it's unlimited for the number of users that you want. So editors, it's unlimited, and the number of viewers, that's unlimited. So all of that is what you get for free. Now, if you want to have these additional features and functionalities, it comes with a pro license. The pro license is really affordable, in my opinion. It's $62 US per month per user that needs these features. All the other, what I should mention is that if you need viewing rights or all these free functionalities, that will be free forever. The only thing you pay is if you need these additional features, such as when you get in a world of governance and compliance, so needs for uploading controls and risks centrally and managing all your controls centrally, that comes with a paid subscription. The GDPR compliance module and the full integration with Salesforce, that also comes with a paid subscription. If you want to manage your URL centrally. So the free version, you can attach any URL, but in the pro version, managing them centrally comes with a paid subscription. And what the value of that is that if you attach a procedure or a map, if you attach a procedure or let's say a policy to 10 different maps, if that policy ever changes, all you would need to do is if you have this URL library centrally managed, you change it once, it updates all your maps automatically. So that's the value of the URL library that comes with a paid model, paid subscription. If you want to get version control, release management, that also comes with a paid subscription. So you can see right away that the pro model, the pro version is very affordable, but even still, there's lots of customers that still just use a free model, and that works for them, and they're all good. Now, there's two other licenses that are valuable that I'll touch on very quickly. The Enterprise Admin is really if you are a Salesforce customer, it allows you to manage multiple Salesforce orgs and spaces. So if you're not a Salesforce customer, that's less applicable to you today. The corporate IT one is an interesting one. If you're looking at deploying Elements more broadly throughout your organization, and you want to keep track of how many users there are, how many authors there are, who's mapping, where they're coming from, this is really like a corporate IT admin license that lets you do that for $1,000 US per year, and you do get unlimited administrators for that solution. Okay, so that's really how the licensing works. And if you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat window, or I will be moving on in a moment. Okay, so it looks like we're all good. Okay. So I did mention I was going to show you how to access Elements. So basically, some of you may have already received a link to this, but if you have not, I'm just going to pop that link in the chat window. So give me one moment here. Okay, so if you didn't get this link to kind of access Elements, I've just popped it in the chat window. You can obviously click the button that says Sign Me Up. What there is here, there will be a, if you want to get signed up, yes, you do need to opt into my email newsletter. I promise you I'm not going to spam you, but what I will do is, periodically I'll send you other videos on how to do stuff in Elements, some, key features, functionality, that sort of thing. Assuming you opt in, it'll take you right into actually it'll take you to an email that'll give you links to access the application itself, okay? And when you get into the application, actually if you click sign me up and just hit that as a favorite for now, I'll show you, let me share my screen. I will show you what and how to start creating a map from scratch once you get in there. So once you get access to Elements, it'll probably bring you to something that looks like this in your personal space. Where's my personal space? Let's do this. Okay, so there, there's my personal space. You'll have something similar. And if you click on the button Maps in the top left and hit New Map, it's pretty straightforward. You can call it whatever you want. I'll just say Test Map. The theme is Basic Theme, and hit Create. So once that happens, you're going to come to a kind of a blank canvas, and this is where you can start to play around with elements. Like I said, it's free. There's no cost to you. It's not a trial period. There's no annoying trial periods that get removed. It's free forever. Okay. You can simply drag boxes over and type in whatever you want, or you can just double click the canvas and boxes pop up. From one box to the next, you just basically drag and drop arrows in, and it's pretty straightforward stuff. Okay. You can add terminators. There we go. Most of the stuff is, well, everything is basically drag and drop. You can drag in stickies and put notes on there, text boxes, so on and so forth. Okay. The other thing you can do is if you want to invite other people to map there, if you go back to the window where you had your process map, you could, if you wanted to, not in your personal space, but you create a new map, new space. Go to my spaces, and you can say new space and create a new space. I've got a whole bunch of them. But if I wanted to, let's say I had a space like this, I could simply invite to space, and a window pops up. You type in their email and give them whatever permission you want, allow them to do these things, little message, hit invite, and they're invited to that space. And soon you guys will be mapping together. That's really how it works. Really intuitive stuff. If you have any other questions, let me know. But very, very straightforward way to map in Elements and to invite your colleagues, that sort of thing. Okay, so let me just go back and see if there's any other questions. So far, so good. Okay. The only other thing I wanted to mention, and we're coming close to kind of the end of the webinar, I do appreciate your time, and I'll bring up this little offer. For those of folks that actually will be trying out Elements, let me do this. There we go. For those folks that will be trying out Elements and you need some help, you need some questions, maybe you want to think about how to actually deploy it for your organization, I'm happy to jump on a quick call as well with you guys. And I'll just publish a link. You can book a meeting that works for you directly in my calendar. But if you do want to talk a bit about, I'll just turn my camera on. Here we go. Stop screen sharing. So if you do want to talk about how to deploy this for your organization, or you've got some specific needs for your particular situation, just let me know. You can click the link that I published to the chat window right now to book a quick meeting. No obligations. Like I said, the tool's free, and I want you guys to go out and use it, try it out. I hope it's valuable to you guys. Okay. So I will open it up for see if there's any questions. It's been a fairly straightforward webinar with not a lot of questions, but that's fine. If questions come in from the folks that view this afterwards, by all means, reach out. Okay. So got a few more questions. A few more minutes for some questions, and then we will be adjourning the webinar. Okay. All right, folks. I think that's good. I think we're good to go. I hope that this was valuable to you guys. Thank you very much for signing up. Thanks for registering. Thanks for joining the webinar. If you do have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out. My goal is to try to give you something of value. I hope this was valuable to you guys, and I look forward to future webinars. I'll be doing additional ones down the road on other features within Elements that I think are fantastic, and other things to help you along your process journey. So thank you so much. I'm Alexander Kurm, and look forward to speaking with you down the road. Bye for now.